wellness revolution starts now.
Welcome to the program. My name is Bryana Gregory, pharmacist and physician liaison with Physicians Preference Pharmacy, and I am joined by Elena Mango today for yet another conversation. We just love bringing up relevant topics. So today, we are going to peel apart some questions in regard to a couple different medications. The first one being Mebendazole, which is one that we compound, and the other being Fenbendazole, which is one that we do not compound. So we are going to talk about why and address some common questions that we have been getting, because we're starting to see a lot of this information circulate the internet. Right. So we want to clarify some things up. You got some questions for us?
I do. So much confusion out there. So I want to start very basically in very plain words. Talk to us about the difference between Mebendazole and Fenbendazole.
Yes. So both of these are anti-parasitic medications. Now, Mebendazole is the one that we talk about more because we dispense prescriptions to humans. So it's an anti-parasitic or deworming drug, more or less, that has been used in humans for a very, very long time. It's just part of standard protocols. It's always been very inexpensive. On the flip side of that, Fenbendazole is a vet drug and does something very similarly. It's used in all kinds of different species. So it is an animal pharmaceutical drug. So we get a lot of questions inbound to the pharmacy about, I'm already on Fenben. People call it Fenben. I'm already on Fenben. Do I need Mebendazole? So we're getting a lot of these questions from people that are purchasing it from outside sources.
Yeah, and so we do get a lot of questions, and we get a lot of people telling us they are on Fenbendazole. Why is it better for a human being to take Mebendazole rather than Fenbendazole? I think that is a big question out there.
Yes. So the reason that this has become so highlighted is there have been some protocols from people who have used Fenbendazole for themselves to claim that they've cured chronic illnesses and such. And so, of course, that's really great. We want to be healing and always, thinking about new opportunities. Now, over the past 5 years or so, we've seen a major shift where people hear something and then they go down to the vet store, the feed store, and they start purchasing up animal products to use in their own body. One of the things I want to point out about the difference between Mebendazole and Fenbendazole is one was designed for and studied in humans, Mebendazole, and the other was designed for and studied in animals, which is Fenbendazole. So why would we use a vet product in a human when we have a human-tested product?
Right.
So there is not Fenbendazole that, let's say, is compounded and intended for humans, if that makes sense. It's really Mebendazole that's intended for humans. So although humans can take Fenbendazole, we already have a product for that. So there's no reason to go there, especially if people are purchasing this as the animal pharmaceutical drug. Remember that although we don't know maybe how pure that product is, it doesn't need to be tested necessarily to the same level because it's being consumed by an animal. They can eat raw meats. They can eat all kinds of stuff that we would never ingest either. So it's more like a question of why would we do that when we already have a really great product? And I know you're going to ask me some questions about that because I actually have the answer to why.
Yeah, and it was such a great transition because I was going to ask, when I searched the internet preparing for this podcast, I did see a lot of differences and variations about people worried about quality and that they may have gotten a bad batch. How do you make sure that doesn't happen, number one? And that's, by the way, mostly when they're talking about Fenbendazole. So maybe all the more reason people should take Mebendazole from a qualified pharmacy that tests products.
Right. This makes sense. So Fenbendazole, again, being the animal drug, might have other ingredients in it that are completely well tolerated by animals, but may not be well tolerated by humans. They might, but we don't actually know if there's something in there that could be tainting the product, right? Because it's intended for animals. Right. But for Mebendazole, we know because it's human grade and because since we compound it here at Physicians Preference Pharmacy, just like we do with anything else that we compound, we test it. So we test it for weight on site. We also send several samples out to our third-party laboratory to unbiasedly test that to be sure that the potency is correct. So that if we tell you you're getting a 250 milligram capsule of Mebendazole, you're getting a 250 milligram capsule of mebendazole. You're not getting something else in there. You're also not getting an array, possibly, of inactive ingredients that could be bothersome, because usually, and this kind of opens up the conversation around why we have compounding pharmacies in the first place, is we can customize medication preparations so that they are less allergenic for the patient too, because it's oftentimes the inactive ingredients, like the fillers that are in there along with the active ingredient, in this case, that would be mebendazole, that can be more bothersome to the person, causing side effects, causing diarrhea, causing nausea, causing unwanted side effects in the body that we just don't need.
Right.
So when we have the human product to choose from, and we can compound it and say it's more pure because we know our source, then we're going to feel safer about that. One of the things I'm seeing happen very frequently is people are in dire need for mebendazole and to get this medication on board. So they are turning to out-of-country sources to purchase it on their own without a prescription. As a pharmacist, I feel very uncomfortable with even some other supplements being available over the counter, even though they don't require a prescription, because that just means everyone's at free rein to start dosing themselves as they please and as they think is best. Which is why on the supplement commercials, you say, this is recommended. Talk to your pharmacist, because you should be always having drug interactions or supplement duplications screened for to be sure that you're on enough, but not too much.
Well, and that quality as well. And that's another, another piece of this is that mebendazole is FDA approved. And I know that, to your point just now, we've heard that it was difficult to get mebendazole, and I think that that's changing because, number one, it is FDA approved. Number two, because I know certainly with Physician's Preference Pharmacy, there is plenty of stock available, and it is easier to get. On the flip side, for fenbendazole, people were going to that compound because it was maybe less expensive. So let's talk about all of that. You know, the availability, the pricing, where we've come to.
Okay, so we saw something very similar with ivermectin. When any drug becomes very, very highly sought after, we usually see two things happen. The price gets jacked up, so no one can afford it, or the shelves are wiped out and no one can get it and it goes on drug shortage. We kind of experienced a little bit of both of those with the ivermectin, the mebendazole conversation. I want to make something very, very clear. There is not a reason to be turning to out-of-country sources to purchase ivermectin or mebendazole. Usually people do that because they think it's not available in the United States of America. It's available actually right here in Houston, Texas.
That's right.
And we have it readily available. We've been compounding it for several years. So that's a misnomer we can do away with. And I think that some organizations or powers that be maybe have tried to dampen the messaging about availability, right?
Shocking.
So that's just it. It just is what it is. But that's why we're doing this, is to let people know that we have a wide availability of it. So that being said, medications, and I hear this from physicians who have been practicing for decades. They used to prescribe mebendazole, a short course of mebendazole for kiddos or for purposes of traveling to protect against parasites or things like that. Usually it's maybe a couple day course. It's very short. It used to be tens of dollars, $20, something like that for the course, right? So we're talking about a few tablets. Mebendazole now at a retail pharmacy, the going rate is about $600 a tablet. So depending on what you're using it for, someone may be spending close to about $15,000, $16,000 a month. I say spending. They're not actually going to spend that, but that would be the price that they would, get at the pharmacy, at a retail pharmacy. So it was very important to us when we began sourcing mebendazole for our guests that we kept that price down. Very important, because how can you tell someone, oh, I have this available, but it's not going to be affordable to you. So hopefully you can just find something else to use. What does that do? It pushes people to animal sources. It pushes people to non-tested sources, and it pushes people to international sources. That, again, I'm not saying good or bad about any of those things, but we just don't know. And I want to know what I am putting in my body. I want that certificate showing me what's in it, what type of active ingredient is in it. I also want to know that it's been checked that certain things aren't in it, like heavy metals, for example. So we have all that information for our ingredients.
And the standards that you impose at Physician's Preference Pharmacy are even higher standards than a pharmacy certification would ask you for.
That's right. Right. Because
Okay.
that quality is important to us.
It is. Okay. All right. So online, many people are curious about other impacts that mebendazole can have, like low energy, assisting with low energy or hormone problems, boosting testosterone. Is that myth or is that fact?
That's not usually, it's certainly not what we quote unquote use it for. Again, this is approved as an anti-parasitic. And since we've been using more anti-parasitics in our guests over the past several years, we're seeing what they say is a spontaneous resolution of their fill in the blank symptom.
Interesting.
Usually it's inflammatory driven. So we speculate that there is a very high parasite involvement, which is why I think, if anything, the conversation around parasite cleanses is circulating the internet right now and
Yes.
social media right now. I get a lot of messages. Should I do this? Do you do it? I do it because I want to be sure. I mean, I have a pet. I eat vegetables. I don't eat a lot of sushi anymore, but all of those are potential sources too for parasites. And it doesn't have to be a big visible worm. You know, we could be exposed to the eggs. And so we want to be sure that we are addressing that if that indeed is an underlying problem, which then does what? It creates inflammation in the body, it stresses it deregulates hormones, and bleeds into everything that you were asking about.
So you may not even know you have an issue where you need a parasite cleanse, but by doing that and taking some rounds of mebendazole, you can alleviate some of those problems potentially or symptoms. So let's talk about that really quickly. If someone were to do a parasite cleanse because now they saw this and said, hey, I have pets, I want to check myself for that. What's typically the dosage, or what would they usually do for a cleanse?
What's interesting, Elena, is that we here in the U.S. do it a lot different, shocking, than a lot of other countries, right? So because we're in Texas, we're in very close proximity to Mexico. We have a lot of Mexico guests. I talk to a lot of people from Mexico, and I think that we should be taking a page out of their book. For that reason, I've kind of adopted that myself. So I'll just share with you what I do.
Sure.
Is once per quarter, I do a 5-day round of mebendazole. It's 100 milligrams twice per day. It's a capsule that we compound. And then I'm done. Now, if guests have evidence of parasites, which what that usually means is they're seeing some evidence of that in their stool, either if it's eggs or worms or something like that, then they can repeat that, what I just said, in 10 days. And then the next quarter, or maybe even 6 months, they'll do that. So I have talked to several physicians, several people from Mexico that live here now that say, yeah, when we were growing up, I mean, we did it once a year. We did it twice a year. A lot of physicians will say, I think that people kind of need to have a 2 to 4 time a year coverage in doing that sweep.
Great. That's really interesting because it is heating up the internet in some of those questions. So very informative. What about side effects of mebendazole?
Very low incidence of side effects. This is a very, very, very safe drug and can be taken at a dose of several hundred milligrams per kilogram. Now, would we ever usually use that? No. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds of body weight. So that would be a really high dose.
Yeah.
And the dose varies based on what we're using it for, of course. But one of the things that we will look for, especially if someone is using mebendazole long term, so over several months, maybe they're taking it on a daily basis, then we want to watch for elevation of the liver enzymes. And that can happen with other treatments too. What it's telling us is the liver is working harder to metabolize something, in this case, mebendazole. So we just don't want it to elevate too much. But they usually rebound, meaning those liver enzymes come back down when we pull them off of mebendazole. So we have the opportunity to cycle it with other things, maybe like ivermectin, that don't affect the liver enzymes as much. But it's not a permanent elevation in liver enzymes.
Okay. I'm going to just circle back because I know this is a big question and I've seen a lot of posts on the internet as well of people saying that fenbendazole is way cheaper, less expensive than mebendazole. And going back to what we said before, where it's more readily available, and one of the goals of Physician's Preference Pharmacy was to keep the price down, can we alleviate some of those concerns?
Right. So we don't compound mebendazole here, and I don't know what all goes into sourcing that and making it. One thing is that this is not an FDA regulated product on the human side. So there are probably less hoops to jump through, I would think, in getting that approved or getting that distributed, perhaps even getting it manufactured. Again, you and I are not going to go shopping for dinner at the dog food store.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
So there is a higher level of cleansing the food and oversight and all of that. So I think that somebody, you have to pay for that, right? You have to pay for those processes, of course. So I think that that's part of it. Also, I think that the pricing of mebendazole has been unequivocally elevated to a point that's making fenbendazole look so much less expensive. It's really two extremes right now when it would have usually been closer to this. So mebendazole pricing is super elevated, and that's actually what we're seeing.
Okay. But we are trying to do the best pricing that we can for our guests.
Very good pricing for mebendazole. And that's important to us. It's very important to us. And we've heard that feedback from our guests time and time again, which that's very reassuring for us.
Okay, that is reassuring. Okay, you do need a prescription for mebendazole, right?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Yes, just like anything else that comes from a compounding pharmacy, a prescription is required.
Okay, so I'm going to end this with some chatter.
Okay.
And you may or may not be able to answer this, but I have also heard that mebendazole, while it is approved as an anti-parasitic drug, that it is used for many other things. Can you make any comments on that?
Well, there has been some very compelling research come out that mebendazole, not just being used as an anti-parasitic, but even though that's all it's FDA approved for right now, and probably the only thing it will be FDA approved for a while, again, parasites underlie a lot of other chronic conditions. That involves autoimmunity, it involves cancer, or just two primary directions that we could go when we have underlying parasitic infections. We also know, again, as a pharmacist, I'm not just saying, okay, mebendazole is approved for this, and so it does this one thing. We're looking at the pharmacology of the compound, of that drug. And when we look at what that drug is, how it's formed, where it binds, what it does, there are several mechanisms of action, basically several ways that it works throughout the body. One aspect to me that is so fascinating about mebendazole is it has the potential to shift the metabolism at a cellular level. And so when we talk about fasting and ketosis, what are we trying to do? We're trying to accomplish a metabolic shift. And the reason why I think mebendazole is so relevant right now to the health crisis in our country is that we mostly are metabolically dysregulated. And so until we start shifting how our cells metabolize nutrients and create energy, we will still continue to be fairly unhealthy. And so I think mebendazole has a place in therapy there too.
Okay. Well, this was super informative. Any last words that you want to share with our viewers about mebendazole?
Talk to your doctor about mebendazole. And if they have questions about that and they haven't heard about it or they don't know what it's being used for, just have them call us directly. We have these conversations every single day, and we're happy to have them with them too.
Thank you.
If you have any questions about mebendazole or any of the other compounds that we talked about, you can always reach out to us directly, speak with our pharmacist, call us at 281-828-9088, and we would love to have that conversation with you. It would be our privilege. Did you know that pharmacists are considered the most accessible healthcare professionals, and yet at the same time, we are generally the most underutilized? Pharmacists are medication experts, which means that we can best advise you on the safe and appropriate use of your medications, when to take them and how to take them. We're experts in pharmacology, which means that we receive extensive training to understand the science behind how medications work within the body. We screen for any interactions which may occur between the medications you're taking, and we have an in-depth understanding of how these medications affect each system of the body. Your body is unique, which means that the type and dose of medication you take should also be unique. We want you to know that at Physician's Preference Pharmacy, we are always available to you, and we welcome your questions.
In
information provided on this program is neither intended nor implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice and is not intended to replace the services of a physician, nor does it constitute a doctor-patient relationship. You should not use information from this radio program to diagnose or treat a health problem or disease without consulting with a qualified healthcare provider. If you have or suspect you have an urgent medical problem, promptly contact a professional healthcare provider or call 911. Dr. Hotze's Wellness Revolution advises you to always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider prior to starting any new treatment or with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Any application of the recommendations from this program is at the listener's discretion.